Hey guys, it's Maksat Ibraimov here. Today I'm joined by the one and only Coach Sam Zakula. How are you doing, Coach?
Thank you for your time. Good seeing you.
Good to see you, Coach. Sam, last Saturday, all of the eyes were on Anaheim, California, as Ilia Topuria beat Alexander Volkanovski to become the new featherweight champion of the world. Just wondering your thoughts about that fight and what you made of El Matador's performance.
He fought excellent. He did what he needed to do. Obviously, he won the world title. He capitalized where he needed to. He had Volk up against the fence and landed a nice combination. It was a great fight.
Right. And in 2024, we already have two new champions from two new different regions. South Africa's Dricus du Plessis, of course, coming out victorious and getting that middleweight strap. Now Ilia Topuria getting the belt for Spain. How massive do you think this is for the sport to come into the new markets and into new areas, and UFC potentially putting on shows in these new continents?
The sport is very international, and unlike some sports where they're very specific to a region, like American football is only North American audience, cricket is, in Southeast Asia. The sport of MMA is universal. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether it's Africa, Australia, Europe, Eastern Europe, North America, everyone understands a fight, and it's the easiest sport to come up for a fan to kind of see and kind of know what's going on. So it's not really surprising. I always knew the sport would be international like that.
Right. And of course, Robert Whittaker also comes back into the winning column, beating Paulo Costa. What did you make of Robert Whittaker's performance, and do you think he can once again become the middleweight champion of the world?
You can never count out a world champion. They've climbed that mountain once before. He's picked himself up from adversity before, So a guy like Robert Whittaker will always be in the mix. He fought very well against a very, very dangerous opponent, and big fan of Robert.
Right. And lastly, about that UFC 298 fight card, what did you make of Merab Dvalishvili, of course, beating a former Olympic champion in Henry Cejudo as well?
Great fight. Merab's got different level cardio. The pace he puts on people is next level. And that fight also showed that MMA wrestling is slightly different than just like freestyle wrestling, Merab's a very, very tough style matchup for a lot of guys because he just keeps coming, and he won't get tired. So if you get tired, it's a big problem. So one of his biggest tools and weapons is cardio, and it was a great performance. Excellent fight.
Right. And of course, we finally got our main event for UFC 300. What do you think about the main event being Alex Pereira putting on the light heavyweight championship against Jamal Hill? Also, what do you think about the BMF title between Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway? And lastly, what do you think about the pivotal matchup in the lightweight division between Arman Tsarukyan and Charles Oliveira? Which fight are you most excited about for this card? Of course, also we have Cody Garbrandt opening the card and people like Yuri Prochazka also on this show as well.
Me personally, I'm probably most excited for the Arman fight. Ever since he came to the UFC, and he gave Islam a very good fight on very short notice.
His debut as well.
And I would say he's improved a lot since that fight. So he's the guy I'm most excited because he also, out of the guys you've mentioned, fights most versatile. He blends in his takedowns with ground control, very good stand-up. He showed that in his last fight as well. So I'm a very big fan of Arman Tsarukyan. I think he's a very potential to be a next champ.
Now, Coach, speaking of the UFC once again and Canadian MMA, what do you think it will take for Canada to raise the next GSP? What do you think it will take for Canada to build the next generation of a fighter who will be an elite top-level UFC world champion?
Canada's historically had some very, very good fighters. And I think it's only a matter of time till the next Canadian young guy comes and develops. It's kind of hard for the Canadian scene because there's simply not a lot of events. So it's hard for Canadian talent to get that 15, 20 fights before they get to the UFC. There's simply not a lot of events like there used to be. When George was fighting before, just the province of Quebec used to have, 12 to 17 events a year. Now you look at Quebec, they barely have any pro shows. So it's going to take a lot of work in terms of if there's not events for guys to get that experience, it's going to be hard because you're facing competition from Brazil, from Eastern Russia, Eastern Europe, and these guys have 20, 30, 40, 50 amateur fights before they even turn pro. So it's hard to compete with that, but it can happen.
And of course, you're a very well-traveled man yourself. You used to live in Hawaii, Las Vegas, LA. How do you compare the Canadian MMA scene to some other parts of the world? And lastly, what do you think it will take to raise the Canadian MMA scene to the next level and to build this and develop it even further?
Yeah, there's good fighters everywhere in the world. Like we have champions from almost every continent now. So one region doesn't dominate, and it goes in trends. Like 2 years ago, Africa had several champions: Usman, Ngannou,
Adesanya.
Adesanya, and now they have none. They have Vitiskis, but same thing with Australia. So I think the Canadian scene will bounce back. There's a lot of talent here, but like I said, the biggest component that's needed is the experience. A lot of our athletes are showing up far less experienced than the competitors, and that's a big problem.
A gym linked to this one, of course, has so many UFC stars, starting from Sean Strickland all the way to Francis Ngannou. What do you think it will take for Xtreme Couture Toronto to also develop into a gym like Xtreme Couture Las Vegas and to grow into that level as well?
Well, currently, I mean, if you're here tonight, we have a bunch of like very talented guys. We have about 40 people training MMA every night here, and a lot of them are young. They're under 22 years old. So the key is just getting them to compete as much as possible, to develop that experience. The more you compete, the more you develop, the more you learn about your game, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. But it's going to take time, I'm a patient guy. I don't look at the next battle. I look at it as like a long-term battle. And we have some serious talent here, and people don't hear about them in a couple of years. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And also, now that you coach a number of different UFC and Bellator fighters, also you cornered Canada's first ever UFC world champion in Carlos Newton. What would it mean for you to raise a UFC world champion yourself in this gym?
I mean, it's not as much for me. It's like, as a coach, I enjoy helping people reach whatever their goal is. If just to do one amateur fight and have fun and win is to do that. If we have some guys here that their aspirations is that world title, so I'll just be happy to see people that I know accomplish their goals, and in any way that I can help them accomplish their goals, it'll be an honor to do so. And when Carlos was the world champ, we had the UFC title right there on, where we were living. So I know what it takes to get to that level, and we definitely have some athletes that have that potential, and we just need time.
And shortly, of course, you've been in this game for more than 30 years at this point. You're a fighting veteran yourself. How has the sport grown here in Canada? What was it like when you originally started the sport versus today? Do you see any exponential growth?
There's more people doing the sport. As it became more popular, before you wouldn't have 40 people training MMA every night. So just the popularity has brought in more competitors, more athletes to do it. But what I've noticed over the course of time, when MMA became legal here, there's a lot of events. But over the past 10 years, the amount of events has diminished. It's shrunken. Whereas there's more athletes, but there's less events. So what we need is actually more events, so that all the athletes can get a chance to compete. Because the reality is, you don't really know who the next star is. So many variables affect an athlete's life. We just need more events. There's definitely talent all over Ontario. I see it at all the local shows. There's a lot of solid gyms that are creating some solid talented athletes and fighters. We just need more events. That's the big thing.
Mm-hmm. And of course, a couple of weeks ago, two of your very own, Bilal Nassari and Pasha, representing Ukraine and Afghanistan, most of them were victorious. Bilal actually fought in Alberta, and then the very next day you flew over here back to Ontario to corner Pasha as well. I was just wondering and very curious, how do you keep that same passion and that same fire? Doing the sport for so long, how do you still keep that passion and that fire inside of you?
I love the sport as much today as I did when I was a kid and I saw UFC 2.
Wow.
When I saw UFC 2, I used to play a lot of high-level sports and stuff. When I saw UFC 2, I found what I loved. And somebody told me at a young age, if you find what you love and then you find a way to get paid doing it, you don't feel like you work. So for me, it's like I consider myself to be very lucky. I get to do what I love and make a living while I'm doing what I love. And anyone that's lived with me or been around me, they know I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies, television. I enjoy watching all forms of combat. So to me, it's like not a question of how do I keep the love. It's like it's my real first love, and it's all I think about all day, every day, and I just love helping the young guys kind of improve, get better, reach their goals. So.
And also, with both of these guys, of course, representing Ukraine and Afghanistan, training out of here, Xtreme Couture Toronto, also representing Canada as well. Do you think that the stereotype is true that some talent in some of those other countries in the world, thinking of people like Khabib, Islam, Khamzat Chimaev, and even your very own Misha Turkunov, do you think that people from other parts of the world may be a little bit more tougher, growing up in different conditions than local Canadian fighters? Do you think that stereotype may be true or not?
I think the difference is that in certain regions, combat sports, wrestling, sambo, there's more kids doing that sport. Here in Canada, there's not a lot of kids that really do MMA. There's tough people everywhere in the world. But when you look at participation levels, there's obviously a lot more people that compete in these combat sports in these other regions, because in Dagestan, they don't play ice hockey. They don't play basketball. They wrestle, right? In Afghanistan, they don't play ice hockey. So here we have more options. So there's a lot of tough Canadians that are playing ice hockey and these other sports. In America, they're playing American football. So it's just that the popularity of the sport culturally is bigger there than it is here. But there's tough people all over the world. I wouldn't say one region's tougher than another region, because George St. Pierre can fight any of these guys too.
Right, absolutely.
And he's from Quebec, right? So, and same thing with Carlos. When he was at the peak of his game, he could fight anybody. It just comes down to, it's a cultural thing, and these sports culturally are more popular there than they are here. Canadian parents don't want to put their kid in an MMA class to see their kid get boxing and stuff like that. They'd rather put their kid in ice hockey, soccer, these other sports, right? So I just think it's a numbers game. There's more participants competing and training the sport in these other parts of the world, but there's tough guys everywhere.
Now, my last question, but not the least question, probably the most important question out of all, your very own Michael Imperato, your lifelong student. Just wondering what the update is on him. What is his status? With him, knocking on that door, on that UFC debut door, and also how far do you think he can go in the UFC? What do you envision his UFC run could potentially look like? Of course, 10 years ago he was supposed to face Aljamain Sterling. And do you think he has a better chance in the UFC now than he did before? Maturing, growing, and becoming more experienced.
Absolutely. I think Mike had one of his best performances in his most recent fight. He trained really hard. A lot of people don't know Mike. Mike's had a lot of fights. He loves to fight, right? Well, there's a lot of athletes in the sport. They say they like to fight, but when they get emailed for matchups, they decline it a lot. Mike will fight every day if he could. But the Mike today is more mature, physically stronger, more experienced than the Mike from 10 years ago. So Mike today would beat up that Mike. And what's his potential? I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. If he gets your neck, it doesn't matter who you are. A neck's a neck. It doesn't matter, everyone sleeps the same. So his potential is going to come down to how focused he is, how hard he trains. If he trains like he trained for the last fight, he can give anybody, a tough fight. The last guy he fought just knocked out Merab Dvalishvili previously, right? He's fought a lot of top level guys. So it's going to come down to matchups and the dedication.
And what is your final message for all the Sam Zakula fans out there worldwide supporting you and watching you closely?
Thank you guys all for the support. You guys are all welcome to come train here at Xtreme Couture. We have a very good room, and it's very good training, good people, good environment. So everyone's welcome to come down here.
Guys, he's the best in the game, the legendary Sam Zakula himself. It's always a pleasure talking to you, sir, and it's a huge honor to interview you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
I didn't want to move on, but I gotta do what I want. Like, get it.